exactly gets back to the point that I've been making from the very beginning, which is you can spell all this out and define a topic for yourself, and you just may find when you're in your placement setting, it may not be that you throw the whole thing out the window, but you might say, you know what, I'm going to take a different take on this. I'm realizing that this is probably more important to look at than that. Or my teacher really emphasizes this in the classroom more than this, so it might make more sense to study it rather than this, So flexibility again, right, Cheryl?
Yes.
Stay open to whatever classroom you're in. You may take on a different set of interests than we have right this minute. Okay, thanks, Christy.
Okay, mine is a project on how does using differentiation in your classroom by using different learning styles and different cognitive styles, depending on which one you want to call them, affect your students' achievement, as well as like how do they feel about differentiating lessons? Does it help them if they use their own learning styles, or is it really not that big of a deal? Is it better for them to use like all different types, or do they really just kind of want to use their one own? Basically, the plan is to have them each take like a learning style type of test, so that they actually know what their learning styles are, as well as I know what their learning styles are, and kind of see which lessons are they more confident in or more comfortable with based on their learning styles. The interesting part is differentiation is talked about in so many of our classes, and like especially learning styles with it, but there's not really actually a lot of research on how they connect. It's just kind of like assumed. Like, oh yeah, if you learn in your learning style, it'll be better. But there's not really research on how that actually is true. It just says it over and over again.
Very true. Very true. It's one of those things we know we should individualize, and we know we want to meet the needs of all the kids in our classes, but practically speaking, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And have we researched it enough to show that when you do this, here's the kind of result you're going to get? There's not a whole lot out there, so. Yeah. Okay, good. Alexa?
So, as of today, I finally decided that I'm going to do a research project on how having student choice affects student enjoyment of the classroom. Which is a little awkward because I'm not entirely sure how you measure enjoyment. And also the fact that I'm not really looking at if students are more successful or more motivated in terms of academics. I just want to know if they actually enjoy the class more, if they get to choose. Which I feel like leads to all of those other things, but it doesn't necessarily happen. And I think it's also awkward because I want to do it, again, in a Montessori school, but student choice is a pillar of the Montessori philosophy. So if students are used to having that choice, that may make my results a little more biased or awkward, because if students are used to it, then they might not know how much they're enjoying it, versus a classroom where this is really the first time that they get to choose their own things. Just the novelty of it could make it really exciting. So one interesting thing that I've found is kind of more of an introspective thing, where I kind of tend to think I'm the master of the Montessori world. But it's really different looking at Montessori from the perspective of teaching through the Montessori philosophy versus just being a student in the Montessori classroom. Because there are a lot of things that, as I was reading them, I was like, oh yeah, I know that. But if somebody just asked me, can you say what the 5 pillars of Montessori philosophy are, I'd be like, nope. The end. So, as much as I've experienced it and grown up through it, it's very different to look at it from a teaching side, and I think that's true with everything.
Good, thank you.
So that's good.
So my topic hasn't changed since last time we met. Alternative assessments. I'm looking at oral and visual assessments instead of the traditional assessment for the math classroom. So something interesting is that out of all the assessments, and maybe Stephanie, you've come across this too, but oral is what they're trying to push, but they don't really have visual assessments out there, like concept mapping or visual synthesis and stuff like that. So that's something that I'd like to try, and I'd like to see if students are able to do that, and the research isn't really backing it up. So it's great.
Thanks, Megan. Lisa?
So I'm focusing on student motivation and extracurriculars, whether it's sports or band. I want to focus on one, depending on what students I do have. But whether that helps them in their math or science classroom, especially if a lesson is focused on their extracurricular, like so if we're in math, they're using sports problems to figure things out if they're an athlete, and if that helps them understand more. So.
Anything you've run across that?
I'm really in the beginning of my research, so I haven't come up with too much yet, but nothing's really surprised me, so.
All right. Zoe?
Alright, I am looking at the difference in performance on take-home tests and in-class tests. Right now, my advisor and I are trying to figure out the kinks because we want to make sure that it's like an equal and fair way to look at it. Like when students are at home, they could obviously ask for help from parents and stuff like that. In the classroom, I'd be watching them, so they can't do that. So we're trying to figure out a way to make sure that that's like level playing fields. We've already kind of agreed that it would have to be an open book and open note test so that, because obviously at home they could use it still. Research for this is really difficult to find. Hasn't been researched very much. So we're going to try to link it to near and far transfer because there is some things I could research with that.
So what?
Near and far transfer. It's like if I learn something in this room and I take a test in here, I'm going to do better on it than if I took a test like down the hall. So, linking it to like the environment.
Even the same desk matters.
We'll find out.
All right, good. Does anybody have any questions about paper, projects, topics, anything that you've heard around the room that you need clarification on? Okay, good. So let's talk a little bit about, oh, Christy has a question. Okay, so Christy's question is if you're having a hard time finding previous research on a topic, what do you do about that? And normally, for me, if I'm going into a certain topic and I'm finding that I can't find a whole lot that's been done before on that topic, it may be that my topic isn't broad enough, or it isn't specific enough, whichever it happens to be. Sometimes the topic itself lends itself to more or less research. So what I would suggest is to take a look again at the topic itself and what are you opening yourself up into looking at, and do you need to broaden or some way slightly tweak your topic so that you get more into a realm of something that people have written about. Does that make sense? Because to me that's kind of a red flag. It's sort of like if I have this idea that I want to research, I want to write about, and I think, well gee, what have other people done? And I start putting searches out there and I discover I just can't really find much of anything, then either my search net isn't going wide enough at this point and I need to figure out another way to do searches, or I need to somehow modify my topic to either broaden it or slightly change it to bring in some research that other people have done. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to engage yourself in a study that's very unlike any that's ever been done before, because the whole idea here is not just to forge brand new ground, it's to build on, here's a topic that other people have looked at before, here's what they found, and I'm going to try to add to that body of knowledge by doing this. And if you can't find a whole lot, then you may have to just look at the topic to decide if there's a different way you want to spin it, expand it, change it, so that it brings in research that has been done. Welcome. Maggie?
I think I'm kind of going to piggyback off Chris's question, and maybe answer at the same time. Like, what I kind of ran into when I was researching my project is there wasn't a lot of research out there on the connection between discovery learning and self-efficacy, but there was a lot of research on discovery learning with a meaningful learning approach, and there was a lot of research on how self-efficacy affects student achievement. So I found one or two sources that connect the two, but my main lit review is based on defining self-efficacy and why we care. Yeah, it's like a piecewise function. And like, is that okay that, I understand what I'm doing is not like groundbreaking, no people have thought about it before,
Yeah.
but like, I haven't found much that is like the exact same,
Yeah,
and that's okay.
I think it is okay.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because what you're trying to do is to pull some,
Yeah.
now you got me thinking of different pieces
Piece-wise
together.
function.
Yeah, this is a piece-wise function. Now we got to define a domain and, but anyway, so, yeah, I think that is okay.
Are you judging my life?
Home on the
I'm
range.
just laughing like it's stop judging.
Only math people are going to get that.
I know.
Anything else? All right, well, let's talk a little bit about timing and dates and kind of wrap up here. There's a few reminders to you about things. If you want to move back to where you were, you want to.
You're giving away that face so I can feel it.
It's waiting. I'm just in your way and
I know, I said get out of the way.
Hey, listen. I brought you
I
some
didn't
inspiration.
She's on wheels, so you can just,
That's true, you could.
It's really far away though.
Because then you'd be on wheels too.
all right, so in terms of timing for the semester, we're in the paper writing phase right now, so the January through this month, putting all of your stuff together. Your research paper is due on March the 3rd. That's your final deadline. But keep in mind that that is the deadline at which it has to be into your advisor completely finished. So work with your advisor on working that out a little bit and saying, we need to talk about it, we need to make sure that I've got a draft of some kind going by you for feedback first. So, you might be wanting to look at it and say, well, today is, February 4th, 2 weeks from today, on the 17th, I want to try to have a draft together to my advisor who would have a few days to react to it so I can rewrite and work and still have plenty of time to do it. So you'll need to plan those deadlines. We don't have any kind of set deadlines from action in terms of when your drafts and so forth have to be done. The only thing that's set in stone for us at this end is that the papers are to your advisors no later than March 3rd. Okay? The advisor checklist we already talked about, they will turn that into us by April the 1st so that all the scores are in by then.
Do we have to give them the one you gave us, or
No.
did you send them a copy of
Yeah,
it?
there's actually a copy of it at Canvas that they can download, so you don't have to give them a copy.
Okay.
This is just for our reference today. Thanks for asking. And then we have the capstone conversations coming up. So I want to give you just a little bit of a snippet of what that's all about. It's new this year. We have had, in the last couple of years, we've had so many wonderful projects that have been done in the 4160 capstone. And for the most part, most people never heard about them. Because the person goes into student teaching, does all their work, collects the data, writes it up, creates a great paper. The advisor sees it, I see it, Wendy sees it. And in some cases, those have gone a little bit further. Maybe they were presented someplace, but most people never get an opportunity to share those because we're getting close to the end of student teaching by then, and they're a couple weeks out from graduation. So we talked to the people that are in 4160 about this and decided that an interesting way to do this would be to have a sharing of the work that they've done with you. So the April 22nd common time from 4:30 to 5:50 is the time we've set aside. And this is going to be in 1104 Offenhauer West, okay, in the meeting room there. And we will gather that afternoon at 4:30. And the idea is that there are roughly 25 of you and roughly 25 of them that have been doing the research this year. By the time we get to that date, they will have already finished their capstone project, turned it in, papers done, and it's off their desk. They're in their last week or so of student teaching. So what we're going to do is we're all going to gather up there at the same time. We'll just meet a little bit at the very beginning. And we're going to divide you up into two groups. We're going to have one group that is everybody who is AYA Math is going to be in one group. And everybody who is AYA Science or Middle Childhood is going to be in another group. And it roughly splits out 50-50. And then the people in the 4160 class are prepared to go around and do an informal presentation on their project for each person. And we're talking about short presentations here. If you do the math on this, they're not going to have more than about 5 to 7 minutes per person. It's going to give a little bit of an overview of here's what I studied, here's what I found out, maybe an opportunity for a couple of quick questions. So it's going to move right along. But what it's going to do, I hope, is two things at once. One is it gives all of those people who are working so hard on their project this semester an opportunity to share it with their peers like you, so that they have an opportunity to, just to put it on the table what they did and what they learned. And then the other part of it, I think you will benefit a lot from it because it will help you to think about the projects that they're doing in the same subject areas. What did they study this year, and that kind of thing. And if I were you, I would be keying in on that day in terms of what kind of stumbling blocks they ran into. You may want to pick their brains a little bit about